Hola, buen dia, everybody. Hope you're having a beautiful day. Thank you for listening in at Conscious Conversion, a weekly podcast about how we bridge the gap between business and spirit, money and meaning, technology and regeneration in a wildly changing world. In a time of so much polarity and uncertainty, this podcast explores how together we are connecting across the planet, across our differences, and across dimensions as we build the new earth together. I am your host, Sarah Yemtich, and today I am thrilled to introduce you to Dr. Angela Lauria, the founder of the Socially Responsible Coaching Alliance and the Author Incubator. She is Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestselling author of 5 books. She's helped over 1,500 spiritually centered entrepreneurs get their book done in 6 months or less. She lives in Washington, D.C., and she's got so much more going on than just that. As usual, I'm going to drop the bomb and ask my first question to you. Thank you so much for being here, which is, what is your soul's purpose in this incarnation?
Oh, what a way to start. Let's go deep. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And I do have an answer to this question. When I was between 2 and 9, I had frequent visitations from Cassandra. Do you know Cassandra? She's
not yet, but I can't wait to meet her.
Yes, she is a Greek goddess of truth-telling, and she was condemned to tell the truth and never be believed. And as we talked as I was growing up, and we still have chats from time to time, she told me that would be my experience as well, that I would see the truth before other people, that I would share that truth, and that at first I wouldn't be believed. And then people would be like, oh, that's what she meant. And that's pretty much been every reading I get, human design, astrology, like you name it, every reading kind of takes me back to that. And what the gift of that is for me is finding confidence in my own truth and my voice, and helping other people find that. Even if people don't know what the hell you're talking about, being able to find a way to say your truth and bring along people on that journey. So that's really why the Author Incubator, like what we do at the Author Incubator is amplify the voices of people who haven't traditionally been heard, people of color, queer people, women, people who were told that their voice wasn't valuable and what they were saying didn't necessarily line up with the patriarchy or the current paradigm. And that's kind of what we still do. It's like, if there's something you know is true and people just aren't getting it yet, how do we bridge that gap and get people to really hear it? So I help people be heard. And the first step of that is knowing what your actual message is. Not what would sell, not what marketers sell you, not what your teacher told you, but what is actually your true message.
Wow. So when people come to you, do they already know what that is, or do you help them suss that out?
People come to me knowing that they have a story, but the one they want to share is often, or the way they want to share it, I should say, is often in a way that wouldn't be heard. So I talk a lot about an invisibility cloak, and most of my clients are in the recovering witches who were burned at the stake in a past life realm. And so they very often hide in plain sight. And it was a way historically and ancestrally and through past lives to keep yourself alive and feeding your family and surviving. And that survival skill for so many women, especially spiritual entrepreneurs, makes it hard for people to find you. So a lot of what I do is helping to craft the language in a way that you can be seen. And the minute we do that, people freak out and they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to be seen. And so then we do the work of like, how can you create safety for yourself and be seen?
Amazing. Now I know why we were connected. I mean, I knew anyway, but we have a mutual colleague friend, Alex, who has an amazing podcast called The Witch Hunt. And she connected us. And now I see sort of that thread there. That's beautiful that you are empowering those of us who have been silenced in the past or silencing ourselves now, to own our truth and to be empowered to speak our truth. Do you feel like there is still a bit of a witch hunt today?
Oh, of course. 100%.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's inside us. Stuff gets
it's internalized
and internalized. And, I don't know if in some ways social media makes it better or worse, because you see what you're supposed to do. Like, I'm supposed to put myself out there. I'm supposed to do this. And if it's not coming from inside, it won't work anyway. And so it's an internal journey. Like, no one can give you instructions. There's not step-by-step tools. It's really a highly customized curriculum, as A Course in Miracles says. And that is the whole point. And, for me, and this isn't for everyone, but for me, how I have found my way most effectively on that journey is through writing. And I know for some people that's through dance or movement or art, but for me, it's been writing, right? So not to say that's the answer for everyone, but if you are a writer, coming home to your authentic voice, it will be there. You can find it through writing. And I think if you're intrinsically a dancer or mover or an artist, but it's something that has to be yours. And then the commitment, I have a terrible company name. Let me tell you my company name. It's a good story. My company name is also a Laurel and Hardy sketch. It is Becoming Journey. And then people usually ask me, when is it becoming journey? So, 2 words, first word becoming, second word journey. But what that's about is realizing that it really is about the journey. Life, the meaning of life, is about how you take the ride. It's not about the endpoint. I can tell you what the endpoint is. You're going to die. So it's obviously not about the destination. And every step on that journey doesn't have to be, but if you choose it to be, a process of becoming more and more authentic, more and more coming home to the truth of who you are and owning that. And in astrology, they talk about how your rising sign is how you show up in life, and your sun sign is what you're moving towards. That's when you're like in the full light of the sun, right? So I think that is the becoming journey, moving into the full light of what your sun is.
Wow. Beautiful. Very eloquently spoken.
Like a writer,
even. Just like a writer. Well done. So, I read some other things about you, because you also have the, the Socially Responsible Coaching Alliance.
Yeah. I think
I would love to hear sort of more about that, because I imagine that's also tuned into sort of new paradigm, new earth consciousness.
Yeah. So this is a hard topic, and I'm not sure how listeners will feel about this, but for me, and I will speak to my journey here, the most important part of my journey to success was really learning about personal responsibility. So I've been a writer, and I've been involved in the publishing industry. I majored in journalism. I magically found work. I never had a website. I never marketed myself. I was a ghostwriter for 17 years. I would be standing in line at the grocery store and get work. Like, that part was easy. But I always thought what happened to me was coming from the outside. Like, I got lucky, or I didn't get lucky, or I had a good day, or I had a bad day. And I didn't understand what my individual contribution was. And so much of deep spirituality and personal growth and the New Age movement, I mentioned A Course in Miracles yesterday or earlier, all of that really taught me how my thoughts have an impact. And it was like so fucking awesome. It was amazing. I got to go from making and good money. Like, I'm not complaining, but I was making like $100,000 a year as a ghostwriter, which is amazing, to making like $20 million a year as an entrepreneur. Once it clicked in that, like, oh, I create this reality. And I loved it. Now I'm going to give you the controversy. Over the last couple of years with the pandemic and a lot of the social upheaval all around the world, what I've realized is that in the coaching industry, spiritual advising, any of the space, we tend to prioritize individual responsibility because, number one, we can be individually responsible for it. It's awesome because we control it. And number two, it's like at the heart of what we teach, law of attraction, vision boards, like all of that stuff is about what's in your control. And I will speak for myself and say, I lost sight of the collective. I thought all of the privilege that I had was less relevant than the hard, painstaking 20 years of work that I did, that I am not discounting for a hot second. Like, I did a lot of internal work and external work to get every single thing I had. But I didn't notice all the privileges that made it possible for me to do that work. I was not walking 6 hours a day to get potable water. I had 6 hours a day to read Marianne Williamson books, and make vision boards. So there are systematic advantages, and I don't have all of them, but I know my privilege. I grew up in a wealthy country, in a comparably wealthy family. I had the privilege of being white. I had the privilege of going to excellent schools. Like, there's a lot of privilege I had that set me up for success. And so the Socially Responsible Coaching Alliance is really about economic, environmental, and social justice having as important of a role as the individual responsibility that comes naturally to anyone attracted to coaching. So there are a bunch of things that I did where I guess I was hoping other people would worry about the environment, and I would just go do a retreat in Costa Rica and fly private and fly in a chef from Washington, D.C. that was a Michelin 3-star chef, and I'd have a sommelier fly in, and I wasn't thinking about the impact to the local economy. Or I would make decisions about hiring a $5 VA from the Philippines or from India and be like, oh, I'm saving money, and not think about the economic injustice there of how geography determines what we'll pay for services. And is that fair? And is that uplifting to those communities? Should people be paid according to what you're making or what they're willing to take? And I don't think I had personally thought, I mean, I had Black Lives Matter on my website and I was up in arms about Philando Castillo in 2015. But did I really think about the way my marketing or my staffing or even the way I teach was really making it less possible for people of color to access the work that I had available? So by centering myself as a white person and centering my privilege, what was I excluding? So the Socially Responsible Coaching Alliance is really just an alliance. We're not a 501c3 yet, but that is in process. So it is run like a nonprofit. I don't take any money from it. We give out grants for people who have economic, environmental, or social justice components to their program. And we focus on creating best practices specifically for solopreneur or small coaching, consulting, spiritual advising businesses to really think about what are the ways I could be thinking about community wellness as well as individual wellness.
I just want to say bravo. Thank you so much. Like all of that was so, again, eloquently and beautifully said. And it was very enlightening for me. It was very like, it felt really good to receive that. So thank you.
I think it can be hard
for
to
sharing your
hear.
story.
What I'm working on is that the both and. I don't ever want to say that.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to get to. Totally. Is I come from bleeding heart liberal background where I was very much tapped into, I mean, I'm not saying I was perfect about it, but I was very much tapped into, at least politically and intellectually, whether I was acting on it appropriately, I don't know, but I was tapped into that sort of thing, like very much into the social justice and putting others sort of, if not first, at least, like really like looking at my privilege and looking at, all of these factors. And then something kind of the pendulum swung a little bit where I was like, wait, I'm at like personal responsibility, and I got kind of like in that part where you were talking about where you came from initially. I kind of moved there later, was like, oh, wow. And I kind of discovered like my own abilities to manifest. And, like really pulling myself out of any sort of victim mindset and kind of even like shunning a little bit other people when they had a victim mindset, right?
I do that.
So yeah. And there's truth to that. And there's truth to the whole thing. And so what you were just about to get to and what I wanted to segue to is what is the bringing together of those things? Is it collaboration? Is it like, how do we bring together? And this is, I think, what you're doing, the individual consciousness of personal responsibility of like, I am the creator of my reality, and the more Aquarian, which we're moving into the age of Aquarius, way of being that is more on the collective. And I think that's exactly what you're creating. So it probably just gives you another opportunity to wax philosophical and poetic.
Yeah, one of the things that happened to me early in the pandemic, it was before George Floyd, let's call it April 2020. It was early. A really good friend of mine who was a client, he'd done a bunch of books with me, spiritual entrepreneur, amazing person, had been traveling through the pandemic and not wearing a mask, and showed up at my house without a mask. And I had kids and an older guest and I was like, oh, you're not wearing a mask and you've been traveling. And we were all just getting used to it. We didn't even know what masks were yet. Like it was all very new. And he's like, well, if you wear a mask, you're acknowledging that this virus could get you sick. And so he's like, every time I put that on, I would be telling myself there's a pandemic and I could get sick. And it's like a vision board on your face and you look at everyone and that's a vision board. So I'm just choosing not to invite that into my consciousness. And okay, from a law of attraction perspective, I'm all in. I get that. And I'm like, okay, but what do we do about this elderly person in my house who doesn't do vision boards? She's not into manifesting. And the person in my house who is known as my husband, who has asthma and other autoimmune issues, that is worried about getting sick at this point. Like, are we just imposing your vision board on them? And that's where I started thinking about this inherent conflict between what we teach, because in pure law of attraction, he was right. And he's still out there, unmasked, living his best life. It works as an individual, but it's not very thoughtful about the community. And the people in my house could have, like my kid and my husband and the older person who was in my house, we could have, he's like, this is an opportunity. Like, I'll teach them law of attraction. Like, we could have imposed that on them, but they didn't want that. That wasn't their soul's calling in this lifetime or at this moment. So now what are we going to do? Strap them down and force them to believe in the law of attraction? And so, like, that was one thing. And then two, What about the people who don't even have the privilege to have those options? The 12-year-old girl in Uganda whose job is to walk 3 hours to the well and 3 hours back home to get water. Should she also, like, should we not have any public health measures for her? Should we get rid of vaccines? Like, should we get rid of malaria research? Like, it's very nice for you, but that's your privilege speaking. That's not really you thinking about what's best for the community. So that's where I got really the opposite way, right? Like everyone wear masks. Everyone, like hunker down for the community. And then I'm like, that's not right either, because I really do believe in law of attraction. And so I was in this like I don't know what I think. That's what I'm like, I just kept saying, I don't know anything. I don't know what I think anymore. I don't know what I think. And then I started taking, I'm in grad school at the University of Colorado doing a degree in corporate social responsibility right now. Really, because I was trying to just understand what I thought. And I'm like, it's very rare for me to not have an opinion. And what I realized is like, there is a middle way. None of us know what it looks like. And it's our job to find that together. And you said that word in your intro. That is my word of the year for 2022 is together. The only way to the middle path is to find it together. We are just lost in the woods, walking each other home. But that
I love it. I love you. I love it so much. My word after 2020, because I was like you, I was like, okay, I just entered the upside down from Stranger Things. Like up is down is up, left is right, right is left. I don't know who I am or who you are. And I'm lost. Yeah. I was in the dark rabbit holes. I was watching mainstream media. I was like, it's all smoke and mirrors. I'm done. And I, at the end of the year, I came up with, and if you're into the tarot, interestingly, in my sort of hero's journey along the major arcana, every year I calculate where I am on there based on my numerology. And I was in my strength justice year, because those cards are juxtaposed depending on which deck you use. Anyway, and I was trying to like make sense of what strength justice meant for me that year, and like why and who I am and what do I think. And then I came up with this concept of passionate neutrality. And that to me is like strength and justice together. It's maintaining a sense of neutrality about things, finding that middle way while still allowing for passion and still allowing myself to be like, but this, being that guy at the door being like, but this is how this is what's real for me. And yet I can still be neutral and hear you with an open heart and want to meet you where you are so that we can do that, so that we can find the solution together.
Yeah, it's like you have to care less and care more at the exact same time.
Exactly.
Which makes no sense, and it's fantastic.
Well, the truth is paradox.
Yes.
It's full paradox. And I think that's what we've had to learn in the last couple of years is that we have to live in the paradox. And I've talked about that forever in my life. I love that concept, but it's just like actualizing it every single more on a visceral level of what that means.
Yeah. In spiral dynamics, this is about the second tier of consciousness. And I do think as a species, you talked about building the new earth. I mean, I think we're building the new human. And that evolution is coming through the ability to hold paradox in a deeper way. So, yeah, it's a very interesting choice that we have made to incarnate right now. I think this is a very interesting time for the species and definitely for the planet. I don't know if the planet's going to survive one way or another. I don't know about the species. We're going to find it.
100%. I mean, we're going to have to collectively make a decision, and we are in
the act of making that decision. This is what it would look like if we were making a decision. Code red for humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a certain way there's one choice that lends itself towards us continuing and evolving. And there's another choice that lends itself to, destruction. There actually might be more than two choices. Go figure. There's infinite possibilities. What's that?
Something's happening and it's big.
Something's happening and it's big, and there's infinite possibility. And
And
yeah, I mean,
harder it is to opt out of that. Like when I was in 8th grade, the first time I skipped school, it was to go to an anti-apartheid rally at Yale University, a rally for divestiture of the Yale endowment. And I met Bishop Tutu at the intersection of College and Chapel, crossing the street. I had skipped school and taken the bus. It dropped me off at the intersection of College and Chapel. Bishop Tutu was there walking to the protest. And that was a time where no one in my life even knew the word apartheid or divestiture. That's what I skipped school for. Like other people ride around in cars with boys. I was taking the bus to a protest. And it was pretty easy to opt out of caring about apartheid, especially if you were a rich suburban girl in Connecticut in 1987. You could opt out of caring about apartheid. No problem, mama. But it's pretty hard to opt out right now. 8th graders aren't opting out now. You have to be a part of this decision. I'm sure there's some people who are off the grid enough that they're not, but we are being called to a deeper level of personal work to get through. It's not like a option anymore.
Wow. How do you, in your sort of mind's eye, ideally, or maybe your heart's eye, or both, what does this look like ideally? Once we've made this decision, can you taste it or smell it or feel it, or is it still this total mystery?
I mean, I'm living in the mystery. I'll tell you what it looks like is a miracle. If enough people reach this same conclusion, we will have a miracle. And I don't know when this podcast will air, but as we're recording it, there is a global miracle happening in Ukraine. I don't know how that will turn out, but you can see we're early in that conflict, and there was a decision made by enough people that remained in Ukraine to say, we're not just going to fall, we're going to fight. And they are living in that both and. They're living, if you listen to any of the interviews, they're living in a place of peace. They're we're peaceful people. We want our sovereignty as a nation, and we want the invader, happens to be Russia. It doesn't matter. None of these players matter, but we want peace. And I'm holding a very big gun, and I'm willing to fight for it. And it's that passionate neutrality. I'm very happy to put this item down. And if I need to shoot someone, I'll shoot someone. Guns aren't bad.
Wow.
Nothing's bad. Guns aren't bad. Peace isn't bad. Meditating isn't bad. Punching someone in the face isn't bad. This binary, it makes no sense. It in this current context. And it did in the 50s, in the 60s, even through Vietnam, this right or wrong, yes or no, on or off. That's all the divine, blessed masculine. That's such an amazing gift. And right now we're seeing the rise of the divine feminine, which is on and off, yes and no, both and. It's being able to live in that. In certain circumstances, guns are good, and in certain circumstances, guns are terrible. In certain circumstances, you should leave when invaders are coming, and in certain circumstances, you should stay. This definitiveness that we require, we are moving as an entire collective species to a place where it is no longer required. And that's what
and there's a lot of
teaching us.
And thank you. And there's so much discomfort for many sitting in that.
For me more than anyone else, I feel. I hate it. I hate it. I'm really? Both and? Okay. I would like rules.
Where went the clarity?
Right. Yeah.
I liked my clarity. I liked my structure. Yeah. Well, and I like to think, I know you said it's sort of like that was the masculine and this is the feminine, but I also want to think that that was not that necessarily duality and binaryism is, I mean, we needed that stage in our evolution. There's nothing inherently wrong with that either. And yet, and I don't necessarily want to say that the way that where we have been for the last couple thousand of years is representative of the masculine. It's representative of toxic patriarchy. And I want to think that with the rise of the divine feminine, there will also be a rise of divine masculine, of something that will have, you know, where there will be some level of meeting in a place of both and, you know, where it's not, something I think happened over the course of human evolution where the sort of more healthy embodiments of masculine and feminine got lost. And I attribute a lot of that because of the patriarchy. But I like to think that there is. Go ahead.
Some of that feels like a filter from now looking back.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I don't know, father knows best era. Dad works, mom stays at home with the kids. There are 2.2 kids. Divorce is frowned upon, and we don't talk to the ladies who were divorcees, right? Like that 50s America thing. I can look at that now in 2022 and say that was toxic. But at the time, like within that time, everybody felt like, and not everybody, but the majority of it felt like they were doing their best. And there was a purity in that. It wasn't like the alternative was on the table necessarily. And so I don't know that it was all toxic. I think there was a lot of, like, I have been the primary breadwinner in a relationship where I was basically had the dad job. It was my job to make the money, and my partner stayed home and cooked and took care of our kids and made dinner and made the house look pretty. And I used to go to school events, and I would hang out with all the dads and she would hang out with all the moms. And I saw this just like beautiful divine masculine presence among all the dads of like how hard they wanted to do things right. And they were as much victims of the patriarchy as women. So
absolutely.
I don't think that system works, especially not in retrospect. And a lot of people were hurt, but I do think there was a lot of divine masculine fueling.
I agree completely. And I did not mean to insinuate that there wasn't that. I just meant the what was controlling the narrative, what was
for sure
in sort of the powers that be was a toxic patriarchy.
Yeah.
I mean, since the Romans, however long ago we want to go.
Yeah. In Spiral Dynamics is values level 3. And it's a lot of what that authoritarian dictatorship that you're seeing globally rise. There's kind of a regression to that right now, I think, as a contrast for what's coming. It's like clinging on to the last best.
Let's pray that that's a contrast to what's coming, that is the dying breath, as they say. No, because I can't live with the alternative. So I have to rest in my optimism that this is this last moment
what it feels
of kicking and screaming.
It is what it feels like. But we're at such a precipice on so many levels. And I think there's so much going on, just even like in your household, like with whatever, school or electricity, or I always talk about the hot water heater. Like, we don't realize, like, we are on the literal brink. Like, we all decided, all the scientists got together and decided ocean level rise with a 1.5 degree Celsius would mean billions of people die. And we passed that point. And we're at 1.3 degrees Celsius right now in terms of ocean level temperature rise. And we cannot avoid getting to 1.5. And that literally means because of migration, because the sea levels will rise, the ice caps will melt, the sea levels rise. People living in those places will have to move. We now know about 2 billion people for sure are going to be displaced in the next 20 years. It's like now. Like, you remember what you were doing 20 years ago? That's how soon it's happening. Like, in our lifetime. And if 2 billion people have to move inland, there is a fight for resources. There is a fight for borders. There is if we do not get our shit together, like, it is happening. It's happening. And the idea that as an authoritarian leader, you could come in and be like, I don't wait to tell you mofos, you can't come here. Like, that's works if it's 40 people. Look at what happened with Syria, which ultimately is a part of climate change. Even if you look at what happened in the Arab Spring, that's part of climate change. So the Arab Spring was sparked by a drought, which is directly caused by ocean level rise. Everything that's happening when you undo it right now is exacerbating very quickly. And if there's one guy who comes on your property, sure, you can try a stand your ground law. I'm going to shoot this guy. If there's 2 billion, you got to come up with a different system. And that is happening. It's happening. It's not under debate. It is happening. We might be able to prevent 2 degrees rise. By the way, at 2 degrees, we get to like 4 billion displaced people. Like,
that's half the population of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not later, it's now. And this work is so important. And if you are a conscious entrepreneur, if you know how powerful individual work is and changing your thoughts is, if you know how powerful prayer is or astrology is, like, that is more important than ever. But it can't be at the expense of the collective. Like, nice try, but privilege is not going to work because you can't privilege your way out of the end of the ozone layer. Like, it's just, you can't opt out of I'm on the Chesapeake Bay right now. And we will have 22 major storms 10 years from now in a year. We've already had like flooding.
It doesn't matter what's going on.
They don't care. I have $1 million beach house. I can't just like draw a red line around my fancy neighborhood and say, could you like spare us?
Just avoid this one.
We'll pay extra.
Oh yeah. Wow. It's true. I mean, and then, everything in the evolution of this planet / humanity, everything can be seen as a gift for our evolution. And so the way that you're talking, it's like, okay, so this is happening. We aren't stopping this part now. Maybe we had that opportunity 20 years ago. We don't now have that opportunity, although we should still be conscious. But now we need to figure out what we need to do in our mind, heart, and spirit with our neighbors and our neighbors' neighbors and neighbors' neighbors, and, rippling out, 7 something point something billion people. How are we going to manage that? And that's the miracle. I remember growing up as a kid, I believed wholeheartedly that world peace was possible. And I remember thinking, all we have to do is all decide.
Yeah.
We just have to all decide, or at least a critical majority has to decide, no, we're going to do world peace instead. And it was very simple thinking. And at some point, probably in my late teens and 20s, I was like, ha ha ha, little naive child. And now that I'm 40 and this is all happening, I'm like, well, that's exactly what has to fucking happen.
And it can, there is enough. There isn't. This is why people freak out so much about the massive divide between the haves and the have-nots, and 1% of Americans having 80% of the wealth of the country. We gotta divvy up resources differently. We gotta do governance differently. But that's going to be the only way to survive. So we're either going to do it or we're not. Like, this is our best chance for world peace. As crazy as that.
So what you're putting together with your, the socially responsible piece of what you're putting together is basically advice for entrepreneurs and businesses on how they can incorporate this at their level, how they can incorporate a change in their own paradigm.
Yeah. The only thing that I will change from the word advice is it's really a collective. So if you think about colonizers coming into, let's just say, Africa, and saying, here's how you should irrigate your crops. It'll be so much better. You'll have more crops. That's someone coming in from the outside and telling them. And then they didn't realize about that irrigation, like, hey, that's going to affect the river water, which means we'll be carrying more river water, which means more waste is coming downstream, which means more people will have dysentery and die. So nice idea about your irrigation, Chachi, but that's not going to work for our community. So the idea with the Socially Responsible Coaching Alliance is not that I'm the guru and I've got the answers, because the only thing I can promise you is I'm not and I don't. But together, this is our garden. Like, we love coaching. We love the power of magic and miracles, and we create them all the time. And we got to figure out how to garden our own patch together. So it's really a collective to share. I tried this sliding scale pricing and it really didn't work. I tried doing a grant program and here are some of the results I got. I tried doing all of my retreats virtually and everybody did a, environmental impact statement. In making that decision. I tried doing this thing. I've decided this is how I'm going to reinvest my 401k for my employees. So it's really just getting the tribe together and everybody sharing what's working and what isn't working, and not blaming anyone, not yelling at anyone. It's just like, hey, let's talk about our gardening techniques and which ones are working and which ones aren't. So I share what works for me. Other members are sharing what works and what hasn't worked for them. And we're going to develop our best practices as a tribe and a community, not from some colonizer, me or anyone else, coming in and saying, here's what you should be doing. You should be regulated. You should do that. Everybody should have this. Everybody needs this, whatever, checkbox on their website. Because I think that's just part of the
that's the revisiting an earlier part of our conversation. That's the structure that we all want so badly because we're used to it to relax into, but it's not that simple anymore.
So I don't know the answers, but like, y'all can come over to my house and we can talk about it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So you've talked some about like how you work, but is there anything that's particularly relevant in this moment that we'd want to share with folks about what you're up to right now and how they can get involved?
Yeah, well, the Socially Responsible Coaching Alliance, which is sociallyresponsiblecoachingalliance.org. Joining that, there's free memberships or the maximum price is $30 for the year. So this is not, and all that money goes into grants to fund programs that we collectively vote on and believe in. That program is for anybody who believes in the power of the individual and knows how important it is to be a part of the collective as well, that we can't just vision board our way out of ocean level sea rise. So that, I would love anybody who is moved by that conversation to just join either subscribe for free or pay the $30 a year, and you can be a part of the trainings that I do in there, which are really what I talk about is more of an inventory. So I'm not teaching you what to do, but I'm teaching on these specific topics so you can make some decisions and try things out for yourself and then share them when the group meets we do quarterly meetings where people share best practices and we give out our grants and stuff like that. So that's what's happening there. Yeah. And then theauthorincubator.com is where I help people write books. And most of the people I work with are conscious marketers, conscious entrepreneurs that care about this stuff, but they don't even know what to think. There's so much going on individually that they're like, I hope someone figures out the environment. Meanwhile, let me do a vision board workshop. So.
Yeah. And you show up on social media. Yeah.
Yeah.
How can people find you there?
Yep. So on Twitter, it's grants, the number 4, and then coaches, grants for coaches on Twitter. So that's where I do most of the socially responsible coaching alliance connections. And then on Facebook, the Author Incubator. So facebook.com/the Author Incubator.
Awesome. Anything on Instagram?
No, I know I need to do that, but I am Author Incubator on Instagram, but I'm not good at posting. I'm good at hearting your stuff. If you follow me, I will follow you back and I will heart your pretty pictures. That's how far I've got.
That's where I was like, I don't know, like 5 years ago. I'm like, what is this Instagram fangled thing? Now I'm
You know
into
why?
it.
Here's the deal. This is why I think Instagram hasn't been my go-to place is like, I'm a writer. And it's hard to write on there. I can't figure out where to put where I put them in the comments. And then they're always like, that's too long and you can't have a link. And then I'm like, what's a picture I could put? So I am ultimate word girl. I'm actually on the autism spectrum, and the visualization part of my brain is like a big black hole. I've gotten the brain scans and it's like, what's missing right there? It's like, I can't visualize anything, and I'm not a picture person. So
well, thank God for all kinds of diversity, including neurodiversity, so that we can all help each other out.
Yeah.
Because you've got a shit ton to offer. And I'm like super blown away by a lot of what you said and how you said it. And I'm really grateful to have had you on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad we got to connect. This is important stuff. And I'm glad we're having these conversations.
Me too. And thanks y'all for listening. Have a beautiful day, and see you next time. Mwah.